Yeah, I'm going to say love and greetings to everyone and then just get straight to the issue. See? Now, since the Privy Council passed down their decision and said the charge against Kartel and the rest must be quashed, there's been a whole heap of talk on the internet and social media. People are saying all kind of something, all kind of things people are saying about the retrial and what's going to happen and what should happen, etc. Now, I not too much want to get into the social media too tough. So, we just watch and I listen. But I not really say nothing. Because I observe and I say, boy, there's something that nobody's talking about. But me just leave it. And because I think say, somebody's going to bring it up. But it's a month now, and nobody don't bring it up. Nobody. Now, I'm not surprised that the public, general public, don't talk about it. Because the DPP not talking about it. The defense is not talking about it. And so the general public don't know what go on. Them don't know. So, after a month passed, I think say, I better come forward now and bring this issue to the fore because it's a very significant issue. So, I'm going to tell you now that if you go on Google and type in 3 words, double jeopardy, Jamaica, just those 3 words, because nobody is talking about the law of double jeopardy. Now, as you know, when you do a search on Google, it usually brings up a little piece out of the web page that it comes from, just to give some insight as to what the website is about. And the little insight that it brings up, I'm going to read it to you. This is the very first one that comes up. It says, in Jamaica, the right of an accused person not to be tried twice is entrenched in section 16(9) of Jamaica's Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. You hear that? The right of an accused person not to be tried twice is entrenched in section 16 of Jamaica's Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of that website. I'll come back to it later. But I'll go to the second website that come up. And I'm going to that website because the first website mentions the charter but does not state specifically what the charter says. But the second website does. And this is what it says. Quoting now from the charter. And it says, no person who shows that he has been tried by any competent court for a criminal offense and either convicted or acquitted shall be tried again for that offense. So, what this article now, and this article was from the Jamaica Observer in 2021. This article is saying that according to the charter, you can't try nobody again if there was either a conviction or an acquittal. The only way you can have a retrial is if there was no verdict. So in other words, probably there was a hung jury, so them don't come to no verdict, or there was some circumstance where the trial had to be abandoned. And this was what was supposed to happen in the Kartel trial, because there was an issue with a corrupt juror. And under the law, that trial should not have continued. So that would have to be abandoned, and so you could have a retrial. But once the trial arrived at a verdict, either guilty or not guilty, you cannot try that person again for the same offense. So now, you probably wonder now, say, how come Paula Llewellyn talk about a retrial? How that work? And that now take us back to the first website. Because what that was about now, that website, and that was in 2018. A judge, his name is Patrick Robinson, OJ. He's a judge of the International Court of Justice. And he put forward a lecture at the University of Technology in Jamaica. And the lecture was titled Qualification of the Rule Against Double Jeopardy. And in this lecture, which was attended by all the top notches in the criminal justice system in Jamaica. So Paula Llewellyn was probably there. What this lecture was about now, this judge, he acknowledged that this rule is an important rule, the rule about double jeopardy. And it is a rule that is observed in most systems of law right across the world. And this rule has protection under Jamaica's Constitution. But he was now arguing in this lecture that the rule must not be just rigidly applied. There must be exception. And to make his argument, he referred to the Stephen Lawrence case in the UK. This was in 1993.
A violent racist attack that was over in 20 seconds. Almost 20 years on, a jury at the Old Bailey deliver their verdict. After 2 police inquiries, a public inquiry and the Macpherson report, Stephen Lawrence's murder remained unsolved. But his family's long, agonising fight for justice ultimately changed the way Britain is policed. After just 48 hours, police received these anonymous letters naming 4 out of the 5 men who were to become the prime suspects. Doreen Lawrence handed a written list of suspects to one detective, only to see him screw it up into a ball right in front of her. 2 weeks passed before an arrest was made. There was anger that police had missed the chance to find the murder weapon or incriminating blood-stained clothing. After lawyers and police decided there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute, the Lawrences were left to launch a private lawsuit. That also collapsed, and the 3 defendants walked free.
If I wasn't angry, I probably would have fallen apart by now. It's the anger that's kept me going.
Stephen's family fought on, meeting Nelson Mandela and tirelessly working to keep the story in the headlines. They had to wait for 4 years to see the suspects face hostile crowds, brought before a judicial inquiry ordered by the government. The report by Sir William Macpherson called the Met Police Force institutionally racist. It also highlighted failures and a lack of leadership and led to the removal of the double jeopardy law, opening the door for potential new charges against the suspects.
The inquiry may have shone light on institutional racism, but it didn't bring the result the Lawrence family so desperately wanted: the conviction of their son's murderers.
In the 11 years since, there have been 3 murder investigations, 2 police reviews and a public inquiry, yet his killers still remain free. Now the Crown Prosecution Service says it's unlikely the case will ever be solved.
But then in 2005, double jeopardy, the rule preventing suspects being tried twice for the same crime, was scrapped. Something Macpherson had recommended in his report 6 years earlier. But with no new evidence, this offered the Lawrence family little hope.
At every turn, the Lawrence case makes history. They literally challenged every step of the way, and whatever obstacle was in the place, statute, law and so on and so forth, they just overturned it.
A tiny spot of blood found on the collar of Dobson's jacket has a 1 in a billion chance of not belonging to Stephen. Other fibres from the dead teenager's clothing were allegedly found on a multicoloured cardigan.
Using the latest forensic technology, new evidence was found during a cold case review of Lawrence's murder that tied 2 of the previously acquitted suspects to the case. In 2011, the trial of Gary Dobson and David Norris for Lawrence's murder begins in light of the new evidence.
So this judge now, what we are talking about, he referred to this and said that Jamaica should adopt a similar approach where it allows for a retrial under certain circumstances. And he specified, again, that it must be where there is new and compelling evidence, not just you have a retrial because you feel say you should have a retrial. Okay. So now, it seems that following his recommendation, Parliament now introduced 2 laws now that were supposed to bring this into effect. So first they introduced 2 bills now, and then the bills were enacted in November 2021. So that is just over 2 years ago now. All right, the bill was enacted. But when the bill was first presented, we call them presented first now, and in an article, and that's the second article now that we referenced. In the second article, it was written by some lawyer. And the second article is saying that the 2 bills are null and void. The person who wrote the article is saying, this was like I said in the Jamaica Observer, the person is saying that, listen, these 2 bills, they contravene the Charter, and this Charter is protected by the Constitution. So you can't make bills now that's going to override the Constitution. You can't do it. That was what the article was about in 2021, before them actually put it into law. And so the article is saying the 2 bills are null and void. But it seemed although the bills were null and void, them still put it into law. So what you have now, it seems, is that in the same way that the Kartel case had to be thrown out because there was violation of some fundamental principle, here now, them seem like them doing the same thing again.
Secondly, the trial continued with the allegedly corrupt juror serving as one of its 11 members. In the board's view, there should have been no question of allowing juror X to continue to serve on the jury. Allowing juror X to remain on the jury is fatal to the safety of the convictions which followed. It was an infringement of the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution.
So, they are introducing bills that override something that is in the Constitution. What they should have done is like what they did in the UK. First, as far as I see, is repeal the Charter. So once they repeal the Charter, then they can now introduce the bill. But you can't introduce a bill that's going to override the Charter. That's not supposed to happen. But it seems that the DPP are that them want do. So just to now make a little bit more focus on what apparently the DPP is thinking. According to these bills that were introduced in 2021, it allows for a retrial, but it specifies 3 conditions that will allow a retrial. And the 3 conditions, none of them mention new and compelling evidence. A retrial, according to now the new bill that was enacted in November 2021, it says, but for the commission of the administration of justice offense, it is more likely than not that the accused person would have been convicted. So when you read this thing, it comes as if the DPP know that the Privy Council would have quashed the conviction. So it's as if now them decide, say, watch out, make we bring in this law so we can now retry the case, because it doesn't mention about new and compelling evidence. No, it just says that, and them put it in a legalistic phrasing. But what I say basically is that even if there was some administrative offense committed by the prosecution, they did something wrong that they should not have done. Even if that happens, but it is more likely than not that the accused person would have been convicted, you can retry it. I don't know myself. And it seems that is what the DPP now is now thinking about. But I'm now look on the fact that this new law is null and void. The only way that this retrial could happen is if they had first repealed the Charter. But search as much as I do, I search, I can't find nowhere where there's any mention of the Charter being in any way amended. So the Charter still stands. And this new rule that I'm bringing can't override the Charter. That's what the thing said. So perhaps my analysis of the situation is in some way flawed, and perhaps they have amended the Charter, and I don't know. Or perhaps there's some other thing that allow it. But the article in the Jamaica Observer was pointing out that this new thing that them introduced is null and void, as so the thing said. So I just think I'd have to bring this out to make people know what's going on. All right? Bless.